Hello, everyone. Welcome to Middle Fantasy, the show where I talk about science fiction fantasy. I am your host, Zach. Today I'm joined by a very special guest, my good friend, Julia. How are you doing today?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. I'm just in my closet as basically I normally am, so nothing's really changed. How are you doing? I see you have such an amazing little art room back there. Uh,
Thank you so much. Same, nothing's really changed. I'm just kind of in this little art area all the time. Walls are constantly full, so there's just kind of a stack on the floor right there, and what I can
as
fit on my easel goes on the easel.
as it should be when it comes to art. Art is love, art is life. But today we're going to be doing something amazing for Middle Fantasy. Today we're doing a new series where we're going to be talking with people within the fantasy community, spotlighting some of their projects, and we're just going to be just talking about fantasy for a long time. Now, when it comes to you, Julia, what is your relationship with the fantasy genre?
I think it's interesting as an illustrator that we are when you think of fantasy art, you think of Magic the Gathering, you think of art for book covers and stuff like that. But doing fantasy art kind of goes all the way back to the French salons when people were doing illustrations of grand epic stories. And, the Raft of the Medusa painting is basically, in some ways, a illustration of a fantastical event. So it happened and they were depicting how it happened, but it feels like something out of fantasy. So it goes all the way back to then. And what I try to do in my own work is pull together my relationship to fine art, painting, and fantasy work. And the more and more I get into fantasy work, the more I'm surprised and delighted by how many people have also done the same with their work and try to bring in traditional work of the past and merge that with the up and coming stories of today. And that just gives me a lot of joy.
Yeah, because it's funny. Like the reason why I know you is because of all your KKC art. Like the first time I remember seeing your art was I think it was on the subreddit, and it was like I think it was a watercolor of it was Tablin the Great, and there's Cobb and all of them in the Waystone, and it's like one of my favorite pieces that I've ever
I'm
ever
so
seen.
glad to hear that. Yeah, and I totally, I went on the subreddits very early on in my reading of KKC, but I always forgot to post them later on the subreddit. So I'm really glad other people did. That one was actually a part of my thesis where I did
Really?
yeah, my senior thesis for illustration was painting five huge paintings. They were all in oil, but that one is like 5 foot by 4 foot.
Oh wow.
It is giant, along with all the other ones for my thesis. So the one with Kavoth and Ari on the roof, if you've ever seen that, the one of him in the art of fishery with the fire and everything. All of those paintings are enormous. And my whole thing for my thesis was all of these illustrators were being taught to do Disney styles or go to work for American Greetings, or like they were kind of feeding us through to do a very specific thing.
Oh, you mean the Cal art style a little bit?
That's what everyone was aiming to be, was Cal Arts. And that's not what I went for. And they knew that, but they were kind of like, okay, Julie, you just do whatever you want to do. And I'm like, I'm going to make giant paintings. So I kind of didn't really fit in specifically anywhere within my major or the painting major or any other. So I'm like, I want to do something that's like those giant paintings from way back when. And that was why Pat's World kind of sprung to mind, which is it feels larger than life. It feels like whenever you hear a legend in that world, it could be a real legend. When you hear about TAC, it's real enough to be a real game, and that's why it is. That's what really inspired me about his work and bringing that into a reality where they are giant paintings themselves. So that one, yeah, it's enormous, and I am so sorry to my parents because it's still in their basement because we have nowhere else to put them. They're so big.
Oh, I mean, there's a great place. There's a place in my fireplace where I could just like put
Yeah,
it. I'll just have to get like a leveler so I can make sure it's like level, but it's gonna be great.
yeah. As long as you have very high vaulted ceilings, it should be fine.
I'll just make it, and I'll just figure something. I'll just knock a wall down and just make like a little art gallery.
Right,
But
right.
I think the great thing also about when it comes to fantasy paintings is that I think when it comes to them, especially covers or whatever piece of media, is that compared to a lot of other art, it's almost like trying to capture like a moment or like an essence of when it comes to like those paintings. Because when it comes to me in like book covers, there are so many times where I'll like, oh, look, this book has like such an amazing cover. Read it, I'm like, it's not that good. The cover's great though, but you just like you have those moments where it like tries to capture that essence. And I think when it comes to how you do your work, it's so much fun. It reminds me a lot of like Frank Fazaria or like almost like a Drew Struzan a little bit, where it's supposed to capture just the tone.
Yeah, Drew Struzan's one of my heroes, so that means a lot.
Yeah, because it's weird because it's funny because when we look at fantasy, it's come a long way, especially with art. Because I always think of like the Frank Frazetta stuff, where it's just like heavy metal and rock and roll, but now it's more subdued or it's more. It has its own unique style that's always kind of been the same, but has just morphed and changed.
Absolutely. And one of the things, I think it was Kate Welch was mentioning this to her husband, Tyler, who does a lot of the Magic the Gathering and the D&D art. She was like, yeah, ever happened to the chain kini on the women? And I'm like, that is such a great way of describing that kind of art and how it's morphed because, you see a lot less chain kinis on women, which I think is great, but it is a very great way to describe an era of fantasy art and covers and that
Oh
Conan sort
yeah.
of stuff, right?
Yeah, I always think of it as when I think of like the '80s. I always think of big, muscly guy with huge sword, and then there's like I guess it's the Conan the Barbarian art I'm thinking of. With like there's a lady like laying right next to him, or I guess like the slave Leia, Princess Leia
Right.
pose. That's the stuff that you always think about. But now it's more like I would call it more like grandiose or like rustic, where it's both of them but subtle at the same time.
Absolutely.
Because the only one that I can think of that's close to that is maybe like oh my god, what's his name? Michael Whalen, who does all the Stormlight Archive stuff, where it's like super grand and super epic, but it has like that old timey feel to it.
I really love it when people merge those two styles. It feels like fantasy art of old, but definitely is trying to be more subdued and have it's not as obvious. It's not like the Fabio covers.
No, no, and that's actually we'll be going back to the Fabio cover because I'm sure you know exactly what we're going to be talking about.
Oh yes.
Now, what got you wanting to pursue being an artist? I always love hearing these type of stories because for me, I wanted to do this would be weird, but I wanted to be like a crime scene investigator or like a mortician. But people just go
That's
into their
badass.
professions. Yeah.
Yeah. For me, it's always been in me, and that's why I can't imagine doing anything else. As soon as I could hold a pencil or anything that could be a drawing implement, I was drawing. And both my parents are artists, and my mom's favorite thing is she's like, we always had to tell you to put the pencil down and go to bed. So I kind of just had an infatuation with faces and trying to draw them. And, throughout the years, my mom could tell, okay, she's getting more and more serious about this. And this was like fourth grade. She started tutoring me on her own, and she would teach me how to draw eyes. And she went to school to be a graphic designer, and she came out being a fine artist. My dad went to school for illustration, came out to be an architect. So they both took their own paths with it. And eventually, I think I was 12 when I took my first adult painting class. And that was like acrylic still lives. I had my own outside tutor at that point who taught me colored pencil and portraits. Then I kind of had my first mentor when I was 14. His name is Steve Carpenter, and he, way back in the day, used to work for Disney. Like he had
Oh,
meetings on Wednesdays with Walt Disney. Like
I've
he,
heard his name before. Actually,
Steve
yeah,
Carpenter.
yeah, I've heard of Steve Carpenter before.
That's super cool. Yeah, he is a real legend. I mean, he lived in Monaco for a number of years, and he backpacked around and just studied the old masters. And he has a big influence on me and my work, just because he taught me for over 5 years figure drawing and oil painting. And so those kind of became my two loves. And aside from that, I mean, charcoal, just because when I can't paint, charcoal is an awesome thing to work on because that teaches you value and everything else. But I ramble. But yeah, it's always been in me. I was just talking to my partner Peter last night, how he was like, yeah, this is why I don't question that you're going to be doing this forever, because you can't do anything else.
Oh yeah, no, I have that exact same type of thing where I have like I always call it, or me and my friend call it, we have a monkey on our back. Where every time like we're like maybe we should do something else or take a break, the monkey is like, hey, maybe we should like make a video or something. And you're just like, no, 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 stop. And the only way that I can feed it is gotta create.
Yeah, that is a great way to put it. Yeah, it's a constant need to have a creative outlet, and it's been increasingly difficult during quarantine because
Yeah.
my job would allow me to travel and have different creative outlets or have other things to do. But now it's like, okay, I'm in this space and I just have the one thing. So I've had to be like, maybe I try making houses in The Sims, and that's a creative outlet or whatever, just
Yeah.
something to feed that monkey, and then, you know, still have enough energy to do the things I need to do.
Yeah, no, most definitely. We're all in this together, and especially during this time, people have become a lot more creative, a lot more interested in creating things when they can't even leave their house. For me, I've just been reading so many books where my pile has gotten to like huge, like Mondo size, and I'm like, oh, maybe I should stop reading for a little bit. But speaking of reading, what have been some of your favorite book covers? Was there a cover as a kid that you're like, oh my god, this is so epic?
Um, yeah, so hang on. I'm just gonna look up his name really quick to make sure I don't get it
Not a
wrong. I
problem.
feel like it was Christopher something. Charles Santor. That was it. So it was my favorite one when I was a kid was this illustrated book of The Wizard of Oz, and it was
Mm.
illustrated by Charles Santor, and he had like this beautiful mix of colors and values and sketches that I really, really loved and connected with. And I think whether I knew it or not, like I was, drawing from that. There was a bunch of fairy books when I was young. My mom had, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's called the Pressed Fairy Book. Would look at that. Not that I would draw from that necessarily, but I was fascinated at the illustration and the illustration quality of that. The Spiderwick books as well,
Oh
as far
yeah.
as fantasy and illustration go. I would draw from that a whole lot. So those were a number of things that influenced me growing up as far as illustrations go.
Yeah, for me, it's like being a kid that was from like the '90s to the 2000s. There's one covers that I always will always remember, and they're some of my favorites. And if you're we're in the '90s, everyone will probably know about the Goosebumps covers with like Tim Jacobus and how amazing those were. But the ones that I remember, some of my favorite covers that are non-fantasy, is all the illustrated covers for like a series of unfortunate events done by Brett Heliquest, are some of the greatest little pieces of art I've ever seen. Like I just would pour over those things. But when it came to like fantasy, that's like an interesting one because it wasn't until later on in my life that I started to get into fantasy, and when I would see things like, The Way of Kings that Michael Whalen did. Even like my favorite ones are like the bad, not they're not bad, but the original covers for A Song of Ice and Fire, which they're very sword and sorcery, and there's there are many things. And when it comes to covers, some are amazing. Some of them, maybe not might not be the best for the book. Have there ever been like covers for books that's like, man, this might have missed the mark a little bit for the tone in any way, shape, or form?
I mean, gosh, I'm trying to think of other ones, but just
No,
because we were talking
it's the
just
elephant
because
in
we
the
were
room.
talking about yeah, just because we were talking about Fabio, Kavoth is not a Fabio. He's just not. I love Donato with all my heart, and he is a great friend and person who has given me a lot of really good advice and amazing illustrator. I just don't know
It,
how.
it's funny because the other cover that they have is also really interesting. The ones like the wall with the face is a lot of fun. But when it
Yeah,
comes
you mean the 10th anniversary or the very first edition?
first edition, there's like I can't remember. It's like the ones like leaves and stuff, where it's like almost like a door knocker.
Yeah, I think that one is really interesting.
Because when it comes to the Fabio one, it's funny because it's just so it's a really fun illustration. It's perfect for like like a Fabio cover. But when it comes to like Kingkiller Chronicles, it's actually kind of funny. It's like what am I? This isn't the book I was about to read. I like this book more now.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's how I feel about it. Yeah, and he just looks too old. Like he looks like the older Kavoth. Like, Yeah, I just don't know. Like he's done really nice and beautiful Kavoth art with him like playing the lute in the woods. That was my laptop background for a long time. I mean,
Yeah.
he's done it, but yeah, I have a lot of questions when it comes to that cover.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is like one of the few books I know in and out well enough, and I've seen enough variations in cover to know like. So I don't mean to pick on it. I'm just
No.
it's the one thing that I'm like, I know the series well enough to go, that seems odd.
What is actually your favorite Kingkiller Chronicles cover?
I would have to say the 10th anniversary one. Dan Dos Santos, I mean, just knocked it out of the park with the illustrations in there and depicting them. And it was interesting too, because that one was getting created at the same time I was doing my thesis. So I'd see Dan Dos Santos's sketches, and I'm like, I need to not look at those.
Yeah, no, that's a cover that I really wish that I had on like a wall. There's like a bunch of like if I had more wall space, that's one of them. The one from The Way of Kings by Michael Whalen is actually one of my favorite pieces of art ever. And like that's the one that I'd love to get like the original for if I ever had money.
Yeah.
Ugh. But when it comes to this, especially when it comes to like fantasy art, it's actually really interesting with you because you've actually recently had some involvement with like world builders and actually making a piece of KKC stuff for like the Chandrian board. I think we're legally able to say Chandrian here because we're doing this over the internet. I don't, I
Yes.
don't know what the how they're gonna have to split up duties, I guess, to murder us.
Yes, no, I think we're okay to say it. I said it a couple times over stream earlier, so
Yeah.
I think, if they were coming for us, I think we'd be okay.
So what was that like being able to make like this beautiful Chandrian board as well as being able to work with world builders?
World builders, they are such a wonderful group of people, just really big-hearted, want to, do good in the world and just, excited to see their community grow. I know Pat, like this new team is just like something he loves with all of his heart, and I can see why. Like they are just really involved with the community. They want to see, fun new geeky things come out and support geeks that support them. So it's really exciting. They're a really great group of people, and I'm just thrilled that they've helped me with so many projects and invited me on to do a bunch of projects.
What was it like actually being able to like sit down and like illustrate a actual board game? I feel like that's like an interesting challenge compared to like doing art.
Yeah,
And
so the interesting part is I'm not necessarily a graphic designer. I can look at something and go, that looks right or that looks off. And I know that really well with human anatomy and a face and everything. But when it comes to actual design, I can't necessarily always put my finger on what is right or wrong about a design. And I think I've got small voices in my head that are like my really good friend from art school who was a very good graphic designer telling me like, oh no, that's wrong, what are you doing, like I get that sort of feeling from it. But with this thing in particular, again, with just the immense love I have for this world and this IP, it was really exciting. I have it actually like right here. I
ooh, I haven't even seen it yet. Ooh, that's so cool. A quick question: have you actually played a game on of TAC with that yet?
Yes, I have. Yeah, me and my partner had our anniversary, and it was the same weekend that the Jamdrian had come in and the tack board and everything else. So we had a night where we sat down, ate Jamdrian on little pieces of toast, and played tack on it, and it was the best.
Oh man, that sounds like such a great thing.
It was such a great night. So yeah, it was actually both of our first time playing tack. I just haven't had a board or anything to play it with or anyone to play it with. So um, yeah, it was a unique challenge, but luckily they had a pretty clear vision. They knew like the elements that they wanted on it, and as long as I illustrated all of those elements, to their vision, I was able to ask them, okay, what do you think of this arrangement on the pieces and on the board? And we came to the conclusion that we wanted the 3x3 board to be separate from the 8x8 or onwards. So or the 5x5, I mean. So that's why we went with the swords in the center and the flames on the
It,
outside. And then once I knew the color palette as well, that it was going to be gray and green or gray and blue. Um,
What to do? What to do?
Yeah, exactly. So since, flames are gonna turn blue, I figured I could just invert the candle going around it. And Alphonse Mucha is a really big influence of mine as well. So looking into his Art Nouveau art, and I was really trying to draw on those sorts of styles and aesthetics for it.
See, that's amazing, and especially when being able to like work within a world that you absolutely love, like that's like a dream come true. I can only imagine what it was like when you got that email or got that call and just like 1 second. Oh my god. Okay. Yeah. So what do you want for that?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And yeah, no, it never stops being a huge joy. And actually, so I have two tech boards because I got like the just the one tech board, and then I got the smaller cosplay kit from the Indiegogo. So I ended up getting two of them. So this one I keep near my computer. The other one is with my tech stuff now. But
Rad.
it hangs on top of this other piece of art that I was like, oh my god. So I got to do this painting for the Adventure Zone.
Yes, I love the Adventure Zone. Yeah.
So I got to do a piece of art for the back of their comic, which was another one of those instances where, I just that afternoon I was just screaming. I like, what was I supposed to do? So yeah, it's cool that now I get to hang my tack board above that painting until I can eventually get it framed. I'm horrible at framing my own things or hanging them up properly, as you can see by my floor.
Yeah.
um,
No, you're good.
but
Now,
yeah, go for it.
oh, I was gonna ask. When it comes to the Kingkiller Chronicles, I always love asking this to fans. What does the series mean to you? Because it means something different for every person that reads it. Because we all get different meanings out of it. But in your opinion, what does it mean to you?
I feel like it's kind of like a calming center for me at this point, where like it does inspire me and it does remind me of a time where I was just kind of constantly drawing visual art for this world that um, with my own ambitions in the art world and going, yes, I'm going to draw everything from this and I'm going to do big, huge paintings because illustration isn't expecting that. Yeah, like that sort of just bold headed, like, I'll show them sort of mentality that I had in college. It really lined up with, I think, Cavolt's mentality and his own schooling, to a point where the parallels were kind of uncanny at times, but it definitely brings me back to that sort of creative drive. And again, just being in awe of his creative abilities and constructing that world. So for me, it's more like an inspirational, like centering for me. But yeah, I don't really know what else to say that it means for me, but I'm always curious to hear what it means to other people as well, because I feel like that was such a unique experience to go through the book and do that.
Yeah, no, most definitely, because I can give the book to like a musician, I can give the book to an actor, and they'll all get different things out of it, especially when it comes to close journey, especially like me loving like plot structure and storytelling. Like I appreciate the book through like what does it mean to make a myth or what's real versus what's BS because it needs to be for a story. Yeah.
Yeah, and the sort of meta-ness of you reading a story and not sure what's true or what's not all the time because the main character is telling you the story, but it's a story about stories because he's telling you what makes a good story. It's like, I don't know. If you try to think about it too hard, it almost hurts your
You go
head.
cross-eyed a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun because especially it's like I'll probably end up bringing up Hamilton right now. This is where we'll just bring it up. It's like I always think of like when it comes to KKC and Hamilton, they almost go hand in hand in many ways because they're telling the exact same thing but just different time periods to the point of where it blurs the lines at times.
Yeah, no, and that's what I think is so great about like if Pat and Lynn just enjoying each other's company, being nerds for each other. I'm like, this could not be more perfect. I mean, Hamilton is Cavolt is Hamilton, and it's retellings of the same kind of character story arc in very different ways, but it's both pieces of media that I love immensely.
Yeah, no, there's something that I always find funny is like I've actually kind of incorporated when Pat said it was so great. I'm like, this is mine now. Is when he's talking about how Lynn was like they're doing their meeting and he's like, I want to be president of the Don't F It Up committee. And I'm like, oh, that's so good. I'm keeping that.
When he said that, and I think it was right around the time when I was doing my thesis, I made certain people the president of my Don't Fuck It Up committee.
Yeah, like that's like there's like things like that, like little sayings and meanings like that. Especially like I always, it still blows my mind though that this is the story of tonight is supposed to be inspired by the feeling that he got while reading the one scene where they're all shit faced in in the city.
And I love telling people that, like especially my friends and family that are obsessed with Hamilton but haven't like read the Kingkiller Chronicles all the way through. I'm like, guys, if you love this, you're gonna love Kingkiller Chronicles.
Yeah, yeah, most definitely. Yeah. Oh, man, it's funny because when I look at Hamilton, I always think of like it's like that same type of warm fuzzy feeling that you get, especially. Maybe it's because I'm just familiar with the beats, but also I think because it has a story to tell. Same as how when it comes to every piece of art has a story it wants to tell, which is one of the best things. Now, if you have an opportunity to make a cover for any book or any piece of media, what would it be and why?
Yeah, that's really tricky because I think my life has been a lot of just reading fantasy books and then becoming obsessed with this one world because it really connected with me. And then the rest of the time, I'm listening to other audiobooks of fantasy books, um, and then working towards like having a work in a particular show. Or like my dream is to have one of them is to have one of my pieces in this Portrait Society of America finalist international show. So like that's up there. I know that's not like a book cover or anything particular. I mean, I feel like it's the obvious one, but anything of Pat's would be.
Have you ever like thought of like designs like this would be so cool to do almost like a mock-up book cover? Have you ever thought of doing that?
I it's my mind doesn't really naturally work in the way of book covers. Um, I mean, I think if I put my mind to it and went, oh yeah, I need to leave this area blank in this area, and I've seen beautiful book covers that have your center of focus on this half of the canvas when you see it completely horizontally and laid out. There's so much work I really admire like that. My mind tends to work in faces and
Mm,
emotions and scenes. So, if I was told like, yeah, do this as a book cover, I could probably work it out,
yeah.
but uh,
Has there ever been like a fantasy moment that you just think of in your head, especially with all those things like faces and emotions that you just like, I just have to illustrate this like right now? Has there ever been a moment like that?
constantly. I mean, I think the Slow Regard of Silent Things did that to me a
Mm.
lot. Um, so I have just a sketchbook somewhere that's just faces of Ari at different moments, just because she's so gentle and she is by herself, so she's not reacting to anyone, but it's just genuine because it's just her.
Yeah.
I think there's a quiet beauty about that that I really appreciate, and I think that's where I've always butted heads with illustration because they want things to be super expressive and obvious because you're telling a story, and I'm like, no, I want this gentle sort of.
Subtlety can go a long ways.
I lost grades because I wanted to be subtle.
Ah,
So but that's something I find really beautiful. I think that's why I'm drawn to illustrating Ari. But I think I was reading which one was it? Uh, Peter V. Brett's Demon Cycle series. I read the first book, and there were moments in that even where I'm like, I need to draw out this face. I need to understand what this expression would look like if for no other reason than getting it out of my head and wanting to draw it. It's like, ooh, this is a challenge. I hear about this expression. I want to put it down.
yeah, no, for me it's a little different because I always think of everything in like because my background's in like film and TV production, just everything is like shot like a movie. It's like, man, this would look really good, and then my brain's like, wow, that'd be really expensive. Like that's fine though. This is my brain.
Yeah, I took a class in cinematography when I was in art school, and just the way that people line up shots and try to move your eye around the screen, like you've only got this much room, and it rung true, because on a canvas you only have so much room too. But
Yeah.
um, it really blew my mind what people are able to convey just in a 2D surface.
One of my favorite ones I'll always remember. It's actually from Thor Ragnarok. It's actually in the trailer as well. It's like there's Hela, and then they have all these Valkyries on Pegasus, and it's almost like a still frame. You just take that. It's like a painting, and it's like, oh man, this is like a heavy metal rock cover, and I love it.
Yeah, and I mean, one of the many things I loved about the Wonder Woman movie was when they were telling the series of stories or myths that led to Diana's creation was all done in oil painted stories, like grand epic paintings,
Yeah.
and I was all about that.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of like those moments, especially when it comes to fantasy, where you can do things like that, like pictures leaping off of walls, or having like those type of like Beowulf, or like even like Dante's Inferno, like those beautiful paintings where you can do stuff like that. I always get warm and fuzzy when I see that.
Same. I know that's I would say that if I ever got the opportunity to do something like that, like no matter the IP, I guess, I would feel good about that. If I could just, if there's a story that's allows me the opportunity to do something epic like that, I would be all for it, no matter the author.
See, that's so amazing, and it really means a lot to a lot of people, especially with one of my favorite projects from you. Actually, isn't even fantasy related. It was during the pandemic. You were doing this thing. I believe it's called Frontline, where you ask people, "Hey, just send me a picture of you with your face mask on if you're working in the medical field, and I'll draw you." And you've done, I think, up to 100 so far of these beautiful pieces.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it it's evolved so much over the course of this because when the pandemic first started, I was, of course, feeling like helpless, like, oh my gosh, there's nothing I can do. I'm not a healthcare worker, like, but I'm like, I have portraits. So I did put that shout out onto Twitter. I'm like, hey, if anyone feels like it, I'm just gonna do it until the end of the quarantine. Thinking this can't, couple
It'll be
months,
over in
right?
2 weeks. Oh no! Smash cut to
Yeah,
now.
exactly. Exactly. So my what was realistic for me changed pretty drastically very quickly. So once I got up to number 50 or something, I was like, I need to draw a line somewhere just because I was getting overwhelmed. I think there was a certain amount of people sending me their stories, their backgrounds, seeing those faces. Like when people have come back and told me, like, man, I was so emotionally overwhelmed looking at those. I'm like, painting those day in and day out, trying to keep up a certain schedule for myself. It was emotionally exhausting and creatively exhausting as much as I loved what I was doing and I was passionate about it. It was, and there was a lot of the times when I was feeling emotionally exhausted or anything, I'm like, I can't be emotionally exhausted. Look at the people I'm painting. Like I can't say I'm suffering. Like look at what they're doing. So um there was a lot going on there where I was like, it would be healthy for me to draw a limit on this. So I said 100, and I was really fortunate that there was enough people willing to help me with this project and this vision to submit their portrait to me and say that they were interested in helping me fulfill this vision. So um, I since then I collected all of their stories and I have them in a virtual gallery. And also going back to World Builders, I am so fortunate that they were on board with me with this because my whole vision with this was I'm very inspired by them saying that they want to make the world a better place through
Yeah.
people being geeks. And, I'm a geek for portraiture and many other things. So, uh, them seeing that and going, we support this and we want to help is huge. And I was ready foolishly to be like, I'm going to do all the production and the shipping and warehousing in my small apartment all by myself. And I see now that that would have been really insane, but I was like prepared to do it. Um,
This was for the greater good.
Yeah, I was just, I can't express how lucky I was that they were on board with helping me with that.
Yeah, no, I when it comes to world builders, they are so amazing when it comes to like I've done stuff with world builders before where me and some friends we just played the Wendy's tabletop RPG game and we had a lot of fun. We raised some money and it felt good, especially when it comes to doing those charity things or just helping out, being geeky but helping out people. That is some of the most it's a hard feeling to express unless you've been able to do it because it's just you just feel like I've done something good today, but I'm just being myself while doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly what it feels like. It feels like what you're doing is worthwhile and just able to make the world a better place in your own small way.
That's yes, that's so amazing. Well, thank you so much, Julia, for stopping by here on Metal Fantasy. I really appreciate it. Where can they find you and your amazing art?
I'm basically at J Maddalina everywhere, Instagram, Twitter. My Facebook artist page is that too. Patreon, I'm on there. Same thing, J Maddalina. Twitch is J Maddalina, and my website is jmaddalena.portfolio.com.
If everyone wants to look at that stuff, we're going to be having some links down below, so you'll be able to see all the stuff super duper easy. Well, thank you so much, Julia, for coming on. Do you have any last words, any fantasy advice you want to give to anyone back home?
Oh, I mean, if you've got a crazy vision and you're passionate about it, just go for it. Like this is every story I've told so far today has been me going, I'm gonna do this really big crazy thing, and then I do it, and it was totally worthwhile, even though it's kind of exhausting sometimes. Like just it'll be worth it.
Well,
But
thank
thank
you.
you so much for having me on. Sorry.
It's an absolute pleasure. Well, thank you everyone for watching this, and like always, may your food and drink ever be tasteful, and may your books be filled with fantasy and adventure. Bye, everybody. See ya.
Bye.